Hello everyone. Today I have 3 exciting horror books for you to read. All 3 of these authors I have read multiple times. Loved every single thing I've read by all 3. These are 3 of my go-to authors. Like when they come out with a new book, I don't even want to read a synopsis. I don't want to read what somebody else says about it. I'm automatically going to buy it, and they've never let me down. And if you're thinking, what are my favorite horror books going to be in 2025? Well, I got 3 right here. And I know it's only January, and I have more coming in the future, trust me. But my top 10 list is already almost filled out. And these are 3 that you will definitely want to pick up. And as a reminder, I have horror books for sale, and you can find the ones you see on your screen at the link in the description. And if you want to join my Patreon, you'll get free horror stories every month, free horror novels from other authors every month, and other things coming up. So be sure to check out my Patreon page if you want to help support the channel, and I appreciate it. All right, let's get started. So the first book I want to talk about today is called Wake Up and Open Your Eyes by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is his newest one. And this is kind of a possession/apocalyptic story wrapped in extreme right-wing rhetoric and social media influences. And it basically concerns a family. And we're going to see through each of their eyes over the course of this novel how this affects them. But one day the son gets some weird text messages from his mother. She keeps repeating herself and panicking, spouting conspiracy theories and telling him to wake up, open his eyes, the reawakening is coming. And he decides to go visit her because he thinks she's losing her mind. And when he gets to the house, his mom and dad have changed. The house is filthy, it's disgusting. They have TVs in every room in the house just blasting, full blast, this right-wing news program, which in the book he calls Fax News, F-A-X. And we all know what that, what that is in real life, right? And they are obsessed with it. 24 hours a day, they're watching it, they are absorbing it. And they barely even acknowledge his presence in the house. And the house is filthy, and they are filthy. And there's a slime seeming to cover them. And eventually, we're going to find out that this program has infected them with something. And I don't want to give too much away, and not only them, but half of the country as well eventually. And it's causing these people to become possessed. But possessed by what? Is it demonic possession, or is it a possession of this conspiracy right-wing ideology that has churned up all the hate and everything within them? That's the question you'll be asking throughout this book. But it causes people to become bloodthirsty. It causes them to act out their most disgusting, very unsettling fantasies in their head. And yes, this book does get bloody. It does get gross and disturbing at times. These people are having really violent orgies in the street. And pretty soon it starts spreading across the United States. And half the people in the United States are infected. The people that were watching these programs, the people that were listening to social media influencers and wanted to be like them. Even an innocent children's viral hit song seems to have an effect on some of these people. And that's what this book is about. And it's not subtle. It's about people who take their beliefs to an extreme and how it can actually change them from perfectly normal into something else because of this ideology. But he puts that horrific spin on it. And some of the kills in here are just brutal and bloody and fantastic. And like I said, there are these scenes of mass groups of people having these violent orgies in the street while they're copulating with each other. They're also ripping and tearing into each other. It gets very gross and disturbing. But this also affects our protagonist's brother, who also becomes addicted to this fax news. And we're going to hear from his brother, we're going to hear from his brother's wife and his children, how it's affecting them. And our protagonist is not one of them. And so he's trying to get back home to Brooklyn and from where they live in, I believe it's Vermont. And he's just going to have to walk. He takes his nephew with him because his nephew was abused and almost starved to death. And you're going to have to read about all that, how all that happens. But it's just a brutal, relevant, very terrifying book. And it's written in his own personal style that I really love, like all the rest of his books I've read. And it's absolutely one of my favorites of the year, and I absolutely highly recommend it. And there's a link down below where you can pick up your copy through Amazon. And next we have Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. This is the latest one by Grady Hendrix. Just came out as well. And if you've read Grady Hendrix before, you know that he likes to imbue his novels with all these weird, quirky characters and this underlying sense of dark humor throughout his books, and I loved all that. This one he plays very seriously though, and I got to tell you, it's one of the most emotional books I've read, and I didn't expect to find that in here, because this was set in 1970 in Florida, and there's a home for pregnant teenagers, and families send these girls to this home, and this home takes them in, takes care of them until it's time for them to have their babies, these teenage girls. And then once they have the baby, they take the babies away and they adopt out the babies. And then the girls just leave and try to go back to their normal lives. These were actually real places throughout the United States during that time before Roe versus Wade. So again, this is going to deal with a social issue that's still raging in society today. But our protagonist gets there. She's 15 years old. She starts to make friends with a group of girls. At first, she doesn't really like them. They don't really like her, you know. But eventually, they all start getting along and form their own little group. One day, a bookmobile shows up. It's allowed there every 2 weeks. And the librarian slips our protagonist a book, tells her to hide it so the headmistress of this home doesn't see it. And it's a book of witchcraft. And the girls start playing around with some of the spells, the ones they can understand, trying to get revenge on people that have wronged them since they've been there, and trying to make their lives better inside, and these spells start to work. But they're still confused by most of it because they words and phrases they don't understand. But eventually, and I'm not going to tell you how, you'll have to read about it, but eventually the librarian is going to get them all together and say, I will unlock the secrets of this book for you to have more powerful spells, whatever your heart's desire, as long as you join my coven. And they do. However, and this is the kicker, she demands something from our protagonist in exchange for this. And it's something horrifying, and it's something our protagonist will not do. She refuses to do. And eventually, what they thought was an older witch woman trying to help them turns into their worst nightmare, because her refusal to do this is unacceptable. And so this witch and the rest of her coven starts coming after her and her friends. But the amazing thing about this book to me were the characters and their interactions with each other. And you will feel a lot of sympathy for these girls. Like I said, Grady Hendrix plays it straight in this book. And the emotional impact a place like this is going to have on them is going to reflect back on you. They're very, very sympathetic characters, because at the time that was just a thing, and it boggles my mind when I read to realize that that was true back in 1970, you know. But let's talk about this. You'll love this book. You'll love the narrative all the way through. I'm going to talk about the ending. I'm not going to tell you the ending, obviously. But I'm going to tell you this. I cried. I cried. I shed some tears. That was just a banger of an ending. I mean, so bittersweet. It wrecked me. I was like, after going through the whole book, you know, and being with these characters and being invested in these characters and what happens, because you never know who's going to live or die. It was just, the ending was just spot on. Got to give him that, because only three other horror books in my life have ever made me shed actual tears. So kudos to Grady Hendrix. And even if it was just for that alone, even though the whole book is a banger, but even just for that, of course, I loved it. And I highly recommend it. And again, there's a link down below where you can pick up your copy. And next we have the newest one from Eric LaRocca. Now this one is not coming out until the 28th of this month, so about a week when I'm making this video. Not long at all. Definitely pre-order it. Link down below, of course. This is called At Dark I Become Loathsome. And oh man, whew. You know, he's always been really good at grief and trauma and tragedy, and bringing these feelings putting these feelings into these characters in such a horrific way. This is just some of the best queer grief horror I think you will ever read. This book is dark and it is bleak. I'm not gonna lie. By the time you finish reading this, you're going to be emotionally drained, but in a good way, because you know you've just been put through something that was so excellent, and you want to be there every step of the way. This is basically about a guy. He's in his 40s, middle-aged. He recently lost a wife to cancer, and then his son was kidnapped. And at the beginning of the book, we don't know if his son is alive or not. The police are still investigating, still an open investigation. But he gets word at one point that doesn't look good. Let me just put it that way, but you'll have to read about that. He sees and talks to his wife and son as visions or ghosts or whatever. He has conversations with them. But because he feels so guilty about all that, and some things he said and did before all this happened, he considers himself kind of a monster, so he goes out of his way to make himself appear as one. He gets implants in his head like horns. You know, permanent implants in his head to make it look like he has horns. He has a ton of metal piercings all over his face, because when people look at him, he wants them to see a monster, because that's what he thinks he is. But his job, his gig, is that he, for a price, he takes people who are depressed or suicidal, and he performs a certain ritual. And this ritual will be discussed in this book, and I don't want to give that away, but it's extremely creepy. And if you're claustrophobic at all, oh my God, this book is going to send the chills right up and down your spine, trust me. This little ritual he performs. And his thinking is, after the ritual, they have a new appreciation for life. You're going to have to read about it to find out, though. But he meets a man online who wants to use his services, and he becomes kind of obsessed with this guy. During the course of their back and forth messages, this man tells him a story, but it's a very brutal, very terrifying story. But he kind of gets aroused by it a little bit, and he feels a connection to this man. He don't know why, but we're going to find out at the end. This man, when they finally meet and to perform this ritual, this man is going to make a confession that is just bone-chilling. That is something that I didn't expect. I didn't see it coming, and it changes the whole course of what you just read. I mean, it changes the story, and it is just absolutely terrifying. And like I said, this book is dark, and it is bleak, and it's no happy endings, trust me on that, but it is also beautifully written. And this author manages to convey all those emotions and put them into that character, and then they ooze out of the page right back into your head. You know, it's fantastic. I absolutely loved it, of course. And yes, I do highly recommend it. And like I said, the pre-order link is in the description. You need to check this one out. And as always, I want to say thank you for taking some of your time and spending it here with me. And until we meet again, keep reading spooky, my friends.